Welcome back to the Vet SOS podcast. Remember, don't drown the sea of transition. Grab the Vet SOS Lifeline. Vet SOS is brought to you by the Who You Know Network, and we're proud members of the Parade Deck community. We're also now found on the Reese Across America Radio on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can find Reese Across America Radio on iHeart, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app. I'm excited about this episode, Keith. We have John Foti, CEO of Operation Song, with us today. This is such a cool program, one that as soon as I learned about it, I personally went through it just to test it out. I absolutely love what they're doing. They provide a great outlet for those in our community. I think this conversation and this organization is going to be a lot of fun. So how are you doing today, Keith?
I am doing well. I'm also, equally as excited. I haven't done it. I may now, actually, after this episode, but I've heard of it. I'm actually familiar with it because in a former lifetime, I was a professional musician myself. So, this is great stuff. I'm super excited for today's episode.
Nice. All right, so let's jump in the intro here. John is the CEO of Operation Song, a Nashville-based nonprofit that empowers veterans, active duty military, and their families to tell their stories through songwriting. A former U.S. Army combat aviator, he served with the 101st Airborne Division and was deployed to Afghanistan in 2015. After being medically separated from the Army in 2018 due to type 1 diabetes, John transitioned into private aviation management while completing his master's in aeronautics. He later served as a Wounded Warrior Fellow for the U.S. House of Representatives and as CEO of the Dale K. Graham Veterans Foundation, where he led efforts to expand veteran services. John now lives in Nashville with his wife, Rachel, an Air Force veteran, and their daughter, Cecilia. He is dedicated to enhancing resources and services for veterans to honor the nation's commitment to its military members. So happy to have you on here today, John. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Yeah, that last part, I kind of added over time was almost like a personal ethos, you know what I mean? And I used it a lot at the Dale Graham Foundation, and I for sure used it a lot at Operation Song, which is, Americans too often forget that they also signed your enlistment. You know what I mean? Like when a service member commissions into the military, when they enlist into the military, there's a double-sided contract, and people often forget about that other side, right? The other side is the side that Congress and the people of America sign. Right? Like you're willing to go and fight and die for this country, sacrifice for this country along with your family. But America promises to take care of you when you come home, right? Whether that be through educational benefits, housing benefits, compensation for disabilities, and to include the integration into life, right? And Americans have that responsibility. And so I've kind of taken it on as a personal ethos to try and educate Americans on that responsibility through the veterans 501c3 community. So thank you all for what you do. Thank you for having me.
That's fantastic. And I'm so happy to have you on here. I mean, I love your organization. I love what you're doing. So I can't wait to get into that. But before that, let's jump into your transition story. So, tell us how your transition out of the military went.
Sometimes I say terribly, but just the circumstances were terrible, and it wasn't the military's fault, right? So I was in the Army Aviation Captain's Career Course down at Fort Rucker, Alabama, now Fort Novacell for any Fort Rucker folks. It's changed, and so I got sick. I started feeling really lethargic and tired all the time. At the time, I was training for an ultra marathon in California, a 50-miler. And so I thought maybe I was just running too much, training too much. And so I took a couple weeks off and then, got back into it, kept feeling terrible. I went to the flight doc one day and they did some blood work. He called me up a couple hours later and said, "You're an insulin dependent diabetic. You need to come to the hospital now." Because I was days from a coma, which is often referred to as diabetic ketoacidosis. So my blood sugar was absolutely through the roof. I had a 11 A1C for anyone who knows A1Cs, which is, horrendous. And a couple of days later, I got diagnosed officially with type 1 diabetes and immediately almost, referred to med board and grounded on the same day. And so at the age of 27, the only two things I had ever really done in my life were train to lead troops in combat and fly helicopters in combat. That's the only two things I had ever done. And type 1 diabetes took both of those away from me. And so within a year, I was out of the Army and living in Boulder, Colorado. And that was my transition. I for sure was one of those military officers that would tell people they were going to get out, but never had a plan to actually get out. You know what I mean? And so it's really funny now seeing all my peers, pin major and here I am on the civilian side and still some days kind of joke, I would do anything if I could get back in the cockpit and back in uniform. But, this is my uniform now. And so I absolutely love military service, have great fond memories of it, would probably still be in, but have had incredible people and opportunities on the civilian side. And so my transition is really thankful. I'm thankful in my transition for the medical evaluation board process. Of course, a lot of veterans either listening or have gone or are going through a med board. And so I'm grateful for the VA and the Department of Defense partnering together to help that process a little bit. But that's the overview of my transition. You very rarely meet type 1 diabetics who get diagnosed at the age of 27. It's more commonly diagnosed around 5 to 10, sometimes 13, 14, 15-year-olds, but pretty uncommon to get it at 27. And so here I am.
Wow. That's amazing. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, I probably would have gotten you out on a psych med board for training for an ultra marathon, but that's just me. As my dad used to say, I'll lay down till the urge goes away. But I mean, it's amazing that one, you didn't find out till 27, but then you were also, you did the transition and then you continued to move forward. If you're willing to share, or if there were anything, I mean, what was the mental side of that for you, at 27?
You said mental?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably the hardest part, was going from what felt like an invincible combat aviator. At the time I was running 70 or 80 miles a week. And I truly felt invincible. And then suddenly feeling really vulnerable and sick all the time and being insulin dependent, it caused me a lot of anxiety. I actually developed a pretty severe anxiety condition for a while, was having panic attacks 2 to 3 times a day. And most of it was because I just kind of felt like my life was unraveling, and here I had orders for South Korea. I was supposed to be in South Korea within 3 weeks of getting that diagnosis. And so I had, like many service members, identified myself as a soldier, right? My whole life was that uniform. Whether or not I liked it or not, that was my life. And the structure and the reason around it was there on a day-to-day basis. And then, of course, as an aviator, there's additional pride in being able to, suck it up and fight through and combat through anything. And so for me, I think the mental health part was associated with losing my personal identity and trying to kind of reinvent that on the backside. And what's interesting is that, mine is a bit of an extreme example because it was forced by a medical condition, but to some extent, every veteran goes through that as they're trying to reinvent their personality without being able to put on that uniform. You don't really realize that, of course, in the civilian community, we don't share a common uniform. And so common respect, common identity, common decency, and common understanding go out the door the moment everyone has on a different uniform, and, there's no rank that you can hide behind anymore. And there's no structure that you can hide behind. And so the mental health toll was really tremendous. And that, was something I struggled with for a long time. And to this day, I still joke with guard recruiters all the time. I'm like, hey, if you can get me a waiver for type 1 diabetes, I'll get back in, which I think is more or less at this point just a compensation technique for still having, some of those regrets and doubt and insecurity around not being able to serve. You know what I mean? It's one thing to choose no longer to be in uniform, but for it to be taken from you is something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Keith, you got to admire the resiliency and the grit to keep moving forward there too. After that, it's all taken away and starting over.
Yeah. I can't. I always have a soft spot for the folks that do the med board process. I come across a lot of them in my line of work, working in the veteran space, and I mean it's huge. And I do have to say, I mean, I would have sent you to psych for a different reason, because I don't know if anybody's ever said I'm really appreciative for the VA ever before. I've never heard that phrase before in my life. So no, I kid. But all that to say, I mean, such a powerful story. And so you're in Boulder. How do you end up in Nashville? And what was that transition? And how do we get to Operation Song?
Yeah, so the better question is how I ended up in Boulder.
Okay.
It was, so my wife is a military brat, and her dad 8-9 deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan. He was SF Ranger. He was there for the first Gulf War, the invasion of Iraq. Her dad spent more time in combat than around her growing up, and of course she vowed to never marry a soldier, and of course she did. And so she was my military spouse. We were living in Fort Rucker, Alabama, somewhere we liked but didn't love. And for the first time in really either of our lives, we were free from the military telling us where to live. And so we picked the one place we thought would be an oasis of trail running and hiking and outdoor and adventure. And so we just up and moved to Boulder. And I was fortunate that I made some connections and networked into an aviation community and found myself doing the management of private aviation and private aircraft for aircraft owners and the charter system. And so I got that offer and we just moved to Boulder and lived there, and of course, as military families do, we had a tendency to want to serve, to want to be around the military. I think private health insurance obviously is very expensive. We got our first private health insurance bill for my wife, and she enlisted in the Air Force the next month. and so I went from, the combat aviator, want to deploy, want to do this, having an incredible military spouse, to switching. And so I became her military spouse, and she became the combat trained and ready to go airman. And we got stationed at Tinker Air Force Base. She was on the AWACS, which is an aerial surveillance and reconnaissance platform. And Tinker Air Force Base became our home. And that's how I transitioned through USA Jobs. And so for anyone out there, obviously it's an incredible platform. It's less used now than it was 5 or 6 years ago, but it's still an incredible platform with a lot of DoD and military and government positions. I literally was on USA Jobs one day in Boulder because I knew we were moving to Tinker Air Force Base, and I found a position for a Wounded Warrior Fellowship, which caught my eye. And to this day, I still tell absolutely any veteran I can that it's one of the, if not the best program in the federal government for veterans in job placement. Any veteran with at least a 30% disability rating can apply to be a Wounded Warrior Fellow to the House of Representatives, and they will place you within a congressional office in a district that you are near. And so in this case, the 5th seat of Oklahoma had an open congressional seat for a Wounded Warrior Fellow. I applied for it, interviewed with the local congresswoman who I felt like I had an incredible conversation with, hit it off with her staff that fortunately was led at the time by a retired major from the Army, and he hired me. And I went to DC, did some training there, and then got placed within the congressional office, the 5th congressional seat of Oklahoma. And within a year there, I had more business cards than I knew even possibly existed. And so any veteran that I've ever met that doesn't necessarily know what they want to do when they get out, they don't even know necessarily where they want to live, they don't know how to network, I tell them, apply to be a congressional fellow. You will meet everyone who is anyone within your town because you're walking around with the local congress member, right? And you're driving them places. You're meeting with the mayor of every town within that district. You're meeting with all the other Congress members. You're meeting with the state representatives and all of the local business leaders. When I was in the 5th seat, in that congressional fellowship, on a weekly basis, I would meet with the CEO of the largest companies within that district, right? Because they're always trying to get face time with the local Congress member because they have their initiatives, they have their driven, topics that they're trying to get within the head of that member. And for a year, you just get to network and and work on federal programs for veterans and military often. And so
Nice.
I found myself in that role, and it was there that I really started to actually understand the Department of Veterans Affairs and the overlap between the DoD and the VA. And I started to really understand the plight of the military veteran on the backside of service. And this applies to almost every congressional district across the country. So wherever you live right now, there's a member of Congress that manages that district. There's probably 5, 10, 15 in your state, depending on where you live. And they will have someone who's in charge of military and veterans casework. Almost every single district has that individual, and they are one of the most powerful people in your district when it comes to getting something done within the Department of Veterans Affairs or within the Department of Defense for an individual constituent. And it's often the Congressional Fellow that manages that caseload. And in most districts, that's their largest caseload. It typically is VA, DoD, immigration issues, and then Social Security issues. If you have an issue with Social Security, you're getting gridlocked within your local office, you can call your member of Congress, and it's unfortunate, but often it gets resolved much quicker than it would otherwise. And so that's a plug for your local congressman, whoever they are. I don't care what side of the aisle they're on. Call them if you have an issue with the federal government. It is their job to help you, especially if you're a veteran, especially if you're a military service member having an issue. Of course, utilize your chain of command where you can. But if you truly feel like you're in an absolute gridlock with the federal government, call your member of Congress and say, hey, I have an issue with a federal agency and I need help. And for military veterans that are in that congressional fellowship called the Wounded Warrior Fellowship, it is an incredibly powerful tool in learning, networking, and developing your resume for whatever is on the backside. So I did that for a year, and then I got an opportunity to take over the largest veterans nonprofit in the state of Oklahoma at the time, who was in a transition to become an accredited veteran service organization with the VA. And I took over that, and I've been in the nonprofit community ever since. And what's interesting about fellowships and internships with the federal government is that you really won't know what kind of opportunities will open up until you start networking and working through them, right? And that path will unfold for you if you just follow it, right? It's not too different than military aviation, right? You don't have to see outside the aircraft. If you can just trust your instruments, focus on your instruments, follow the plan, you will eventually get to where you're going. Not too different than maybe a road trip, right? You don't have to see the whole road trip. As long as you have your headlights on and you can see 20 feet in front of you, just keep going, and eventually you're going to get where you're trying to get to. And that can be nerve-wracking because you want to be able to see 2 miles in front of you, but you can't, right? And so I started in 2020 during the pandemic with the Dale K. Graham Veterans Foundation, which was it was the largest veterans nonprofit in Oklahoma, and still is now as it's continued to scale. But at the time, we were also trying to launch a digital platform for veterans across the country to be able to utilize a free accredited veteran service claim system that was accredited with the Department of Veterans Affairs. And so I built and scaled that program over 3 years, and then eventually networked with Operation Song that is headquartered out of Nashville. And I transitioned the CEO role at the Dale Graham Foundation over to an individual by the name of Taylor, an incredible gentleman, retired Command Sergeant Major out of Fort Sill. And he is leading that initiative in Oklahoma. And I took over as the CEO of Operation Song in January of this year in order to do something very similar that I had done with the Dale Graham Foundation, which is grow and scale and take the message, mission, and vision of Operation Song nationwide so that every veteran, right? Every veteran listening, Sean, Keith, every single one of you has a platform to be able to tell your story through the power of songwriting, which is extremely powerful and cathartic, but is also an incredible platform to relay messages to Americans that often need to know and understand the content within those songs as well. And I talked to my board a lot about this at Operation Song, that the process for our program is professional songwriters writing songs with veterans, which is extremely powerful. But the other half of our mission is to then take that song and instill it within the minds and hearts of Americans so that they continue to support veterans and their families. And I don't think any of us would want to live in a community where the greater cohort of Americans no longer support military and veterans. I don't think we could go down that path long before we are no longer the powerhouse of the world. And it would be a huge national security issue if we got to the point where no one was enlisting in the military anymore, which of course has been an unfortunate reality of the past 3 years, as every single branch of service has struggled to meet their recruiting goals. And the reality is, every time a kid, a 16, 17-year-old kid hops on TikTok, they see some service member or veteran trashing the DoD or VA, and it makes it harder and harder for them to recruit. And that's why they run cool Super Bowl commercials, to try and counter that, and to some extent they have success, but it has been incrementally less success over the past 5 years. And Operation Song and organizations like ours have a platform to be able to take the stories of veterans and their families to Americans so that they know and understand them, so that we can continue to foster and build a community in which we support them and hopefully encourage them to be a part of this system, right? The VA and DoD system. which the Americans fund.
And I love the positivity. Like, I mean, especially with your journey and the things you've already shared and the emotional hardships you experienced, and yet, you're persevering. The Wounded Warrior Fellows, I've run across a few folks that had done those positions as well. They're, the stories they come out with are amazing. And it is. I will concur. Yeah. If you're a 30% or more VA disabled veteran and you're looking for something to do, check that out for sure. But even the positivity, again, I work in the federal space as well. So for somebody to speak positively of USA jobs just blows my mind. I mean, twice now, the VA and USA jobs. No. But all that to say, so, Operation Song, it's such an incredible little resource, and it's so like thinking outside the box. Like, who would have thought we could get a song written about us and something that would carry on our lineage, our story, this, that, and the other. So for our listeners and viewers, so what can they expect? Because as a veteran, I'm thinking, well, my song's going to be all about alcohol, nicotine, PTSD. It's going to be a dirge, right? So what's the journey that they go through to get into this system and go through this process? Yeah.
So it's interesting too, because you mentioned, what you might write a song about. And that's what I think is a common fallacy when veterans and their families are onboarding to the system. Sometimes they think they have to write a song about one thing or the other. And the reality is you can write a song about whatever you want. A couple of years ago, it was actually up at Fort Campbell. We had a veteran who wrote a song to propose to his girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And she said yes. And they're married to this day. And so you can write a song about whatever you want. It could be about combat, could be about struggles in the military, post-military, mental health, could be about your dog. It could be about, beer, trucks, and dirt roads. It could be about whatever you want. The goal is to give you a pathway and an opportunity to share your story and experiences in a platform that other people are commonly used to listening to, which is music. And the thing that's incredible about our program is our ability to network with songwriters. And that's the single most powerful tool that we have. Our founder, Bob Regan, was doing armed forces tours for the Department of Defense. And, in the early 2000s, as part of, their Esprit de Corps programs across the country and across the world. And he realized veterans have incredible stories to tell. And he happened to be a Grammy and Dove Award nominated singer-songwriter. He wrote hits for Keith Urban, Billy Ray Cyrus, Trisha Yearwood, and he started investing his own time and money into Operation Song, founded it in 2012. And since then, we've written over 1,800 songs with veterans and their families. And the way we do that is through professional songwriters. And so Bob, of course, had a network of all these incredible songwriters in Nashville that he had written with, been around, partnered with on songs. Many songs, top #1 hits, top hits on the Billboard charts for country. And so today we have over 100 songwriters in our program. And when a veteran onboards, they onboard right through our website. I have a team that processes that intake form, helps identify some other needs they may need. We'll do referral systems out for things that we can't help with, such as immediate mental health issues, immediate housing insecurity issues, food insecurity issues. But then we immediately get to work and try and pair them with a professional songwriter, either in person or remotely, depending on, where they live and what their timeline and schedule is. And so you could go from filling out our intake form on our website, which takes 5 to 10 minutes, to being paired with someone like Steve Williams, who wrote Redneck Yacht Club. and so Steve Williams is one of our songwriters. He writes probably 15, 20 songs a year for us. And so you can go from filling out that form to sitting down one-on-one for hours with someone who's written many hits, to include Redneck Yacht Club, and so obviously Steve has done this with many veterans. He knows how to listen. He knows how to translate your words into lyrics, into a melody, and into chords, and then put them out there and record them for you to hear, your family to hear, and the world to hear if you wanted to. And so the real key is, of course, the songwriters, because without them, we would just have a bunch of thoughts and no way to articulate them to the world.
I want to say that you made it sound easy, and it truly is that easy. I think from flash to bang, when I signed up to do this, it was within a couple of days. I was already sitting down with the songwriter, and by the end of that day, I had the song.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason it took a couple of days is I did it on a Friday. So over the weekend, we didn't really have any communication. So,
yeah,
I mean, it literally was probably about 48 to 72 hour turnaround total, which is just phenomenal. And it truly is a lot of fun, because you're sitting down talking to someone you never met before, and they're truly interested in hearing your story.
Mm-hmm.
And then they take what you're talking about, and like you said, you can come in with something you want to write a song about, or they're going to listen to you and they're going to pull something out and help you write a song.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to go through that whole process with them. Now your songwriters, we're not just talking about, Joe Schmo off the street that decides he wants to be a songwriter, right? That they have some sort of background or something to them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we always say professional songwriters. And of course, even in that category, that cohort of professional songwriters, there is still a spectrum, of course, right? We have got songwriters on our roster that are incredibly professional, extremely talented, and have written many, many incredible songs, but maybe they don't have a top hit. And then, of course, at the higher end of that spectrum, in terms of, recognition and success, we have many songwriters that have written just as incredible songs that, of course, have been picked up by artists, been cut onto records, and have had the opportunity to go number one. And so, so for instance, I wrote with a guy named Casey. He's a songwriter in our program, and he wrote a song called "Yeah Boy" for Kelsey Ballerini, and that, of course, went number one. And he's got a publishing deal, and he writes full time for his publisher, and participates and volunteers on our program. And those songs that he writes with us, he can also submit to his publisher because he's a part owner in that song. But he does spend, of course, the majority of his time as a professional songwriter, meeting on Music Row, meeting across Nashville, meeting across the world with other songwriters, and creating music that they hope ends up getting cut onto a record, and of course recorded and put onto a record. And so, all of our songwriters are professional songwriters. And we would never bring someone onto our team and sit them down with a veteran if we didn't think that they could truly honor the service and sacrifice of a veteran or their family through the power of songwriting. And that includes being able to listen, being able to understand, being able to digest, and translate that into the lyrics and the song within a few hours, right? Because of course, we can't take too much of their time. So we try and build it around 3 to 4 hour writing sessions, of which at the end, hopefully you've kind of finished your song, and then the songwriter can cut a little demo right there, or take it home and revise it a little bit and cut you a demo within a few days. And you'll have that typically within a few days, kind of like Sean mentioned. And then our team gets it and puts it into our catalog that we can share and distribute on our platforms as well.
And then the added bonus is you're sharing, what do they call it, authorship or composership or whatever with the actual songwriter.
Yeah, it's 50-50. So you sit down and of course this is always the goal, not because we want recognition for the song or want to make money from the song, but our intent is to be able to share the values and story within that song. And of course, an incredible way to do that would be to have it listened to widely across the world, right? So of course, our goal is to serve veterans and their family through the power of songwriting. But one of the desired outcomes is, of course, to get a lot of people to know and understand the stories and sacrifice within those lyrics, within those chords, within that song, on that track. So we'll try and distribute it and build a platform that people can listen to these songs as well too. And so it's never about the song itself, but of course you want the highest quality song possible, because that honors the veteran and their family's sacrifice and story. But also it's a great way to get more people to listen and bought into the mission and vision of the program.
I absolutely love it, man. It was a fun process, Keith. I absolutely enjoyed doing it. Highly encourage everybody to do it.
Yeah, I'm going to do it.
Check it out. You can also listen to some of our songs too, and gain inspiration from that and kind of see what you think. We have our Facebook and Instagram is a great place to listen to some of our music. We have a lot of it on YouTube, our website. We even have our own app. So if you log into, the App Store or the Google Play Store, you can just type Operation Song, and we have our own app that we manage, and we put a lot of our music on there as well too. Our best song of the year, at least by streams and downloads, is a song that we wrote at a program called Warrior's Heart down in Texas. It is an inpatient treatment facility for veterans and first responders struggling with addiction issues. And they have a full-time residency program on the backside of that intensive care program. We go down there 4 times a year, funded by the Charlie Daniels Foundation, called the Journey Home Project. And we go down there 4 times a year and write with veterans who are struggling with addiction. And we wrote a song that is absolutely incredible. It was written by Jesse Lee and a guy named Arthur, multiple combat tour, SF, Army guy. And since he got out of the military, started struggling with addiction, struggling with alcoholism. And on the backside of this program, he's overcome that, and he wrote a song about that. Mm-hmm. And Jesse Lee wrote it's my favorite song. And I hate to say I have a favorite song because they're all incredible, but a song I'd listen to maybe more than others. Jesse Lee and Arthur wrote that song, and you can listen to it on our app. It's called Good on My Own. And it's phenomenal. Jesse Lee is a really, really popular and incredible singer-songwriter in Texas. Her dad, David Lee, wrote John Michael Montgomery's hit song, Letters from Home, which, you guys have probably heard of. David Lee goes to that program and writes with veterans within Operation Song as well, too. So, there's many veterans that sit down to write a song, and here they are, their songwriter sitting across from them in Texas wrote Letters from Home, which is one of the most widely listened to songs about the plight of a military veteran in the history of the world. It's like David Lee and a couple songs from Toby Keith, are probably the most listened to, veterans camaraderie and service songs of all time. So and those songwriters are in our program, which is awesome. Not Toby Keith, but David Lee.
Well, Keith, as you get ready to take us out, the only thing I realized is I didn't prep John well enough before the show to say that my song was his favorite song. The entire catalog. I mean, that felt like a natural thing there.
You should plug your song. What's the name of your song?
I'd have to go pull it back up.
Don't even remember the name of your own song.
We should listen to it live right now.
Right?
There you go. It's not me singing, so I don't have anything to worry about.
Right. And that's, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I hear that a lot from veterans, because I'll tell them like, hey, you need to write your song. And they'll, I don't know anything about music. I don't know how to write. I can't be. That's perfect. Ideally, a veteran would know nothing about music, because then they can come to that songwriting session and be completely focused on the story, right? Because a song is just a platform to tell a story.
Yeah.
And the songwriter's job is to write the song. Your job is to bring the story and the message behind the song. So the songwriter does all of the actual work.
Yeah.
You just get to do the talking and storytelling. They will write the lyrics. They will come up with the melody. They will do the chords. They will cut the demo. You just get to sit back and share. And
now I don't want
to. Be open, be vulnerable, be real. And those are the things that can make the songwriter have an opportunity to tell your story. Right. And so, yes, thankfully, Sean didn't have to sing on his track, but you could. Yeah. And we do have veterans that want to sing on the recording of their song, which is also incredible, right? Whatever you need to gain from the experience, we have a platform to give you.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
For
Well,
the record,
now
American Nightmares is the name of my song.
American Nightmares. That's that. Now I got to go listen to this one now after this podcast. Send that to me, Sean. I need to hear that one.
Yeah.
The title got me intrigued. All right, so we are over time. We are out of time. This breaks my heart, but I will just say that last little piece, like that's good because as a professional musician, I could see myself getting the songwriter into the weeds. So I will keep my mouth shut and I will let them do their jobs. I got no problem with that. No, I'm gonna go check this out for sure. So, John, thank you so much for spending some time with us. This was absolutely amazing. Everybody listening and watching, go check out this program. Get your story told. Why wouldn't you want to? I mean, I'm getting goosebumps. This is awesome stuff. Thank you so much. And on behalf of the Vet SOS family, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Oh, wait, I got a timeout. Hold on a second. In addition to Operation Song, how do people get in touch with you? Like if they want to help support the program, donate, whatever it might be, how do folks get in touch with you, John?
So the most important thing too that I should mention now, it's great timing, is this program is absolutely free. Every single veteran, military personnel, or their families, so their spouse, their dependents, can write in this program absolutely for free. And of course, to keep it free, we do fundraise. And so if there's any millionaires listening that just want a place to park $100,000, we'd love to accept it. Every single dollar donated to Operation Song goes back to supporting veteran stories and their families, for veterans and their families. And so, but the easiest way to get involved, whether you're a songwriter that wants to write with veterans, whether you're a donor that wants to donate, a volunteer that would like to get involved, and most importantly, a veteran or their family that would like to tell their story, go to operationsong.org and you can kind of tunnel any direction you want from there. And our intake form for writing your song is on the very front page. You can't miss it. It's the very first thing you see. It says, write your song. Actually, I think it might say tell your story now, but it's absolutely for free for veterans and their families. There's no barriers for entry of any sort, no expectation of donating on the backside. But then again, if you are a millionaire, we'd love a few bucks. Thank you.
That's awesome. And if you are a millionaire, we wouldn't mind the Joe Rogan as well. So just throwing that out there. So, but
every dollar helps. So even if you're not a millionaire and you have a veterans nonprofit you donate to every Veterans Day, or something along those lines, we completely tax deductible 501c3 donations for us. And so thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, John, for all that you're doing. And again, for coming on the show and talking about it. This is awesome stuff. All right. So now I got to get us closed out. So on behalf of the Vet SOS family, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Please make sure that you follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. And remember, don't drown in the sea of transition. Grab the Vet SOS lifeline.